Alright, we just finished our ice cream and now we are going to continue our walk along what was formerly the wall dividing East Berlin and West Berlin. You were starting to tell us something, Tom.
Oh, I don't know how long my mom lived in Berlin, but she lived here for a few years after she came over from East Germany.
How long before the wall was built did she leave?
7 years. I think 1954 she moved to West Berlin. So she lived in a village called Tessin in the state of Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, which is near the Baltic Sea, outside of the city of Rostock.
And that gets squished as we cross the road.
Her mother and aunt left in 1954. Said they were visiting their cousins in West Berlin, which they did, but they never left. So, from West Berlin, I don't know how long they lived here. Several years, and then she was 14 years old, same age as Maggie when they moved. And then a couple years later, they moved to somewhere in Bavaria, I think. I can't remember the town's name right now. And then eventually they settled in Zinsheim, Baden-Württemberg, where my grandma and great aunt lived until they passed away in 1989 and 1990. And when Germany was reunified. And that's where they are buried today.
So the section that we just walked along was the former border patrol wall along the wall when it was here, and we learned about some escape attempts prior to the wall being constructed, and also that many of the students, especially in West Berlin, but many other people mobilized to try and help people escape from East Berlin to West Berlin. Many of those people, of course, would have been their family members, friends, etc., that were trapped on the east side of the wall, and they did a lot of different things, from digging tunnels, etc. There were 3 tunnels that were successful, and I think 10 attempted tunnels that were not successful. In some cases they were using, listening devices in cellars, trying to locate tunnels and destroy them as they found them. So a lot of people were trying to help, even though the wall was keeping people apart for a long time. 1961 to 1989.
28 years.
And the wall, when it was fully constructed, was 185 kilometers or something like that.
90.
This is Bernauer Straße. This subway station was walled off in 1961 and remained walled off until I think 1994. And during that time, it was what is known as a ghost station. So, in other words, the trains would still run through this section of the city, but they didn't stop here until they got to West Berlin. West Berlin was totally walled off from the rest of Western Germany, and the train station was closed, so you would just see apparently cobwebs and a closed train station at this point, and many others in the city. So even after the wall came down, there was still a border crossing here until the reunification, which was about a year after the wall came down. So do you want to tell us about your experience coming here as...
I was like 10 years old, I think it was 1988. We drove through East Germany. We rented a car in West Germany, got a special visa to come visit. I drove through East Germany, which was in and of itself much different than West Germany. The Autobahn was not in good shape. We were in a rented Mercedes, which is a very luxurious car compared to the local cars. We stopped at a gas station. Shelves were pretty empty. This convenience store / gas station. Arrived in West Berlin and took a tour of East Berlin. We had to go through Checkpoint Charlie on a tour bus. Checked everyone's ID, and it was all very controlled, exactly where you could go. No wandering allowed.
And now, like, at that time you were a child, right? You were about 10 years old, and so that was kind of like a touristy experience, I guess. But like, do you have a different perspective on that now, thinking about that as a tourist experience?
It was still kind of intimidating and scary at the time. It was like they're motioning us to come. It was still, I would say, you're afraid of the soldiers and stuff, and something happening and getting trapped over here.
It just also seems like it's kind of an odd. Here, maybe I'll do this like this. It's kind of and we can keep walking, but it's kind of an odd tourist experience in general, right? Like that they would make that a tourist experience where you're, you know, kind of going to see people who are suffering and cut off. And
we went to see like 3 things. There was like a Soviet War memorial. There was that church that we walked by yesterday, the giant church on the river, by the river, in Museum Inzo, and probably museum also on that museum island thing. That's pretty much all I remember.
It's interesting. It's fascinating memory. Like, not that many people would have experienced that. So it's just interesting to think about that, like being here and walking in this area. And you know, one of the things that they talk about in the visitor center is that at the time the wall was up and, you know, separating the 2 areas, it was impossible really to imagine a reunified city and that it would essentially disappear. But today, other than this place and a few places, you know, where the bricks show where the wall was, it's really hard to imagine the city as a divided city, I think.
Yeah, I did come back for a few days in 2005, and then it was cranes everywhere on the eastern side, especially. They were rebuilding everything still, and that was 15 years after the wall came down.
You know what's depressing is the fact that this isn't even the saddest walk we're gonna go on.
Yeah,
in
that's
Germany.
True. I know it's important though that, you know, we just learned about how even creating this memorial was kind of controversial, right? And
I mean, people had like different opinions of who they should be honoring, even.
yeah, exactly. But ultimately, you know, as an outsider and not someone who experienced that time or anything, I think it's good that it's here and we can come and, you know, kind of experience that. So what we're standing in today is this beautiful grassy, peaceful park, but when the wall was standing, this was known as the Death Strip.
On the other side.
You keep saying. So we're standing today in what is this beautiful grassy park with a beautiful walkway through it. It's very peaceful and beautiful. But this area, when the wall was here, was known as the Death Strip. So people who were trying to escape would have first scaled this wall, and then they would have had to cross this grassy area, which would have at the time been an obstacle course of barbed wire, tire spiked strips to stop cars, and other devices, similar devices. It would have been patrolled by guards. There were guard towers, guards with dogs, and then they would have had to cross the second wall on the other side, which would have been the main wall, in order to escape to freedom.